God knows what I would not have given for a few more minutes of sleep, but deep down I felt that to sleep would mean to die, and something within me revolted against this death. All around me, death was moving in silently, without violence. It would seize upon some sleeping being, enter into him, and consume him bit by bit. Next to me, there was someone trying to wake up his neighbor, his brother perhaps, or a friend, in vain. Discouraged in the attempt, the man lay down in his turn next to the corpse and slept too. Who was there to wake him up? Stretching out an arm, I touched him. Wake up. You mustn't sleep here. He half opened his eyes. No advice, he said in a faint voice. I'm tired. Leave me alone. Leave me. My father, too, was gently dozing. I could not see his eyes. His cap had fallen over his face. Wake up, I whispered in his ear. He started up. He sat up and looked around him, bewildered, stupefied, a bereaved stare. He stared all around him in a circle as though he had suddenly decided to draw up an inventory of his universe, to find out exactly where he was, in what place, and why. Then he smiled. I shall always remember that smile. From which world did it come? The snow continued to fall in thick flakes over the corpses. The door of the shed opened. An old man appeared, his mustache covered with frost, his lips blue with cold. It was Rabbi Elihu, the rabbi of a small Polish community. He was a very good man, well loved by everyone in the camp, even by the kapos and the heads of the blocks. Despite the trials and privations, his face still shone with his inner purity. He was the only rabbi who was always addressed as Rabbi at Buna. He was like one of the old prophets, always in the midst of his people to comfort them, and strangely, his words of comfort never provoked rebellion. They really brought peace. He came into the shed, and his eyes, brighter than ever, seemed to be looking for someone. Perhaps someone has seen my son somewhere? He had lost his son in the crowd. He had looked in vain among the dying. Then he had scratched up the snow to find his corpse, without result. For 3 years they had stuck together, always near each other, for suffering, for blows, for the ration of bread, for prayer. 3 years from camp to camp, from selection to selection. And now, when the end seemed near, fate had separated them. Finding himself near me, Rabbi Elihu whispered, It happened on the road. We lost sight of one another during the journey. I had stayed a little to the rear of the column. I hadn't any strength left for running, and my son didn't notice. That's all I know. Where has he disappeared? Where can I find him? Perhaps you've seen him somewhere? No, Rabbi Elihu, I haven't seen him. He left then, as he had come, like a windswept shadow. He had already passed through the door when I suddenly remembered seeing his son running by my side. I had forgotten that, and I didn't tell Rabbi Elihu. Then I remember seeing something else. His son had seen him losing ground, limping, staggering back to the rear of the column. He had seen him, and he had continued to run on in front, letting the distance between them grow greater. A terrible thought loomed up in my mind. He had wanted to get rid of his father. He had felt that his father was growing weak. He had believed that the end was near and had sought this separation in order to get rid of the burden, to free himself from an encumbrance which could lessen his own chances of survival. I had done well to forget that, and I was glad that Rabbi Elihu should continue to look for his beloved son. And in spite of myself, a prayer rose in my heart to that God in whom I no longer believed. My God, Lord of the universe, give me strength never to do what Rabbi Elihu's son has done. Shouts rose outside in the yard, where darkness had fallen. The SS ordered the ranks to form up. The march began again. The dead stayed in the yard under the snow like faithful guards assassinated, without burial. No one had said the prayer for the dead over them. Sons abandoned their fathers' remains without a tear. On the way it snowed, snowed endlessly. We were marching more slowly. The guards themselves seemed tired. My wounded foot no longer hurt me. It must have been completely frozen. The foot was lost to me. It had detached itself from my body like the wheel of a car. Too bad. I should have to resign myself. I could live with only one leg. The main thing was not to think about it. Above all, not at this moment. Leave thoughts for later. Our march had lost all semblance of discipline. We went as we wanted, as we could. We heard no more shots. Our guards must have been tired. But death scarcely needed any help from them. The cold was conscientiously doing its work. At every step, someone fell and suffered no more. From time to time, SS officers on motorcycles would go down the length of the column to try and shake us out of our growing apathy. Keep going. We are getting there. Courage. Only a few more hours. We're reaching Gleiwitz. These words of encouragement, even though they came from the mouths of our assassins, did us a great deal of good. No one wanted to give up now, just before the end, so near to the goal. Our eyes searched the horizon for the barbed wire of Gleiwitz. Our only desire was to reach it as quickly as possible. The night had now set in. The snow had ceased to fall. We walked for several more hours before arriving. We did not notice the camp until we were just in front of the gate. Some kapos rapidly installed us in the barracks. We pushed and jostled one another as if this were the supreme refuge, the gateway to life. We walked over pain-racked bodies. We trod on wounded faces, no cries, a few groans. My father and I were ourselves thrown to the ground by this rolling tide. Beneath our feet, someone let out a rattling cry. "You're crushing me! Mercy!" A voice that was not unknown to me. "You're crushing me! Mercy! Mercy!" The same faint voice, the same rattle, heard somewhere before. That voice had spoken to me one day. Where? When? Years ago? No, it could only have been at the camp. Mercy! I felt that I was crushing him. I was stopping his breath. I wanted to get up. I struggled to disengage myself so that he could breathe, but I was crushed myself beneath the weight of other bodies. I could hardly breathe. I dug my nails into unknown faces. I was biting all round me in order to get air. No one cried out. Suddenly, I remembered Juliek, the boy from Warsaw who played the violin in the band at Buna. "Juliek, is it you?" "Eliezer, the 25 strokes of the whip. Yes, I remember." He was silent. A long moment elapsed. "Juliek, can you hear me, Juliek?" "Yes," he said in a feeble voice. "What do you want?" He was not dead. "How do you feel, Juliek?" I asked, less to know the answer than to hear that he could speak, that he was alive. "All right, Eliezer, I'm getting on all right. Hardly any air. Worn out. My feet are swollen. It's good to rest. But my violin." I thought he had gone out of his mind. What use was his violin here? "What? Your violin?" He gasped. I'm afraid that they'll break my violin. I've brought it with me." I could not answer him. Someone was lying full length on top of me, covering my face. I was unable to breathe through either mouth or nose. Sweat beaded my brow, ran down my spine. This was the end of the road. A silent death. Suffocation. No way of crying out, of calling for help. I tried to get rid of my invisible assassin. My whole will to live was centered in my nails. I scratched. I battled for a mouthful of air. I tore at decaying flesh which did not respond. I could not free myself from this mass weighing down my chest. Was it a dead man I was struggling against? Who knows? I shall never know. All I can say is that I won. I succeeded in digging a hole through this wall of dying people, a little hole through which I could drink in a small quantity of air.